Hi, strangers.
Despite today's case being quite famous, I still want to warn you that this episode contains graphic violence towards a child. Listener discretion is advised. It's the day after Christmas, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado. On 15th Street, in the affluent neighborhood of Chautauqua, there is a brick red house that looks like something out of a storybook. From its perfectly triangular roof to the towering chimney, it's clearly a house of a wealthy American family. Its grass is perfectly green despite being winter, and tall pine trees hug the perimeter. On this day, if you were to enter through the tall iron wrought gates in front of the house, you would be greeted by a small Santa Claus figure, sitting in his sleigh, and a brick pathway lined with knee-high plastic candy canes that led to the front door. When you look at this house, it's hard to think that anything terrible could ever happen behind its doors. In one of the 5 bedrooms of this perfect-looking home, a woman named Patsy is waking next to her husband in her darkened bedroom. It's about 5:30 a.m. in the morning. She and her husband, John, have to get up now because they have a big day ahead of them. They are planning on taking their 2 young children on their private plane to Michigan, where they will meet up with John's family and then travel to a port, where they will get on a Disney cruise for a family vacation. Patsy leaves her bedroom and makes her way down to the kitchen to prepare some coffee. As she is walking down the stairs, she notices something strange. There is a pile of ripped-out notebook paper lying on one of the steps. Patsy picks it up and reads the following handwritten note. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We do respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money, and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory. Signed, SBTC. Patsy Ramsey screams for her husband, John, and the 2 of them rush to their 6-year-old daughter's bedroom. But she is not there. Despite the note telling them not to contact the authorities, at around 5:50 a.m., the following 911 call comes into the Boulder police.
911 emergency.
Police.
What's going on?
By 515th Street.
What's going on there, ma'am?
We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please.
Explain to me what's going on, okay?
There's a note left and our daughter's gone.
A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter?
6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old.
How long ago was it?
I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's
Does it say who took her?
What?
Does it say who took her?
I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
It's a ransom note?
It says SBTC. Victory. Please.
Okay, what's your name? Are you
Kathy Ramsey, I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
I'm sending an officer over, okay?
Please.
Do you know how long she's been
No,
gone?
I don't. Please, we just got out. Is she right here? Oh my God, please.
Okay,
Please, there's somebody.
I am, honey.
Please.
Take a deep breath,
Please,
okay?
hurry.
Patsy.
This is part 1 of the mysterious murder of JonBenét Ramsey. Hi, strangers. This is your host, Alexa Morrissey. Last week's episode covered a really tragic murder of a 9-year-old girl named Brizenia Flores. And if you haven't listened to that one yet, please do, because Brizenia's case deserves just as much attention as this one. But writing about her death really upset me. I couldn't help but think about how young and innocent she was. And as I was writing about her, I also couldn't help but think about another little girl. A little girl who has been haunting the American psyche for almost 30 years now. JonBenét Ramsey. JonBenét was murdered when I was 4 years old. And throughout my early childhood, I felt like her name would come up every couple months. I remember seeing her face on the TV, but not understanding why. She was probably the first major true crime case I heard about, but I never really researched it. Every adult I knew seemed to have an opinion about the case. From how they thought her brother was her killer, to blaming the parents because they let her get dolled up and sexualized for beauty pageants as such a young child, and that somehow was how she caught the attention of a crazed killer. I knew the theories, but I didn't know the facts. And that's what we are going to do today. We are going to go through the facts of the most famous murder case in recent American history and learn what we can about what happened on that Christmas night, 1996. Lock your doors and listen closely. This is Stranger in the House. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990, in Atlanta, Georgia. She was named after her parents JonBenét and Patricia, or Patsy. She had a brother named Burke who was 3 years older than her, and 2 older half-siblings from her father John's first marriage. When JonBenét was 1 year old, she and her family moved to Colorado for her father's job. John Ramsey was a very successful man. He was the president of Access Graphics, a computer software company that later became a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin, one of the largest companies in the aerospace, military support, security, and technologies industry. Because of his success, the Ramsey family lived an affluent lifestyle. They had a beautiful home and access to luxuries like private planes, the best of the best. Patsy was a former beauty queen, and when JonBenét was around 3 years old, she saw her mother all dressed up on stage at a pageant reunion and knew she wanted to be just like her mom. JonBenét won her first competition in 1994, at just 4 years old, at the Colorado State All-Star Kids pageant, and then went on to take home first-place titles at Little Miss Colorado, America's Royale Miss, and National Tiny Miss Beauty. At one point, her mother and father were hoping she might lose some pageants, just so she could learn that she won't always win at everything in life. But JonBenét was unstoppable. She thrived in the spotlight and wowed the judges with her bright blue eyes, white blonde hair, and gorgeous smile. A few days before Christmas, in 1996, 6-year-old JonBenét performed Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree at the Southwest Plaza Mall in Littleton. She wore a sparkly all-red outfit, her skirt resembling a poinsettia. She sang and played the saxophone. She was the epitome of an entertainer, even at such a young age. On Christmas Day, JonBenét and her 9-year-old brother, Burke, were buzzing with excitement. JonBenét got a brand new bike, and she and her father went out to the street and tried it out that afternoon. After that, the family got ready and went to dinner at a family friend's house. By the time the family returned home, JonBenét was already fast asleep, and her parents carried her into the house, up to her room, and tucked her in. They had no idea that this would be the last time either of them saw their little girl alive, ever again. The day after Christmas, the Ramseys call police to report that their 6-year-old daughter is missing from her bed, and that they found a handwritten ransom note demanding $118,000. Police arrive soon after Patsy calls 911. When police arrive, they notice that there are no signs of forced entry into the house. They do a search of the house and take the ransom note into evidence. While police search the house, the first big mistake was made in this case. Visitors coming to check on the distraught Ramseys were allowed in and out of the house that morning. Some of them even cleaned the house while they were there, most likely thinking they were doing something nice for the family, but really, they were contaminating the scene and wiping away any possible evidence or fingerprints. In the ransom note, the kidnapper tells the Ramseys that they will call within the 8 to 10 a.m. time frame to give them more instructions, but the phone never rings. During this time, police officers make note that John and Patsy's demeanors do not change when the kidnappers never call. They don't start panicking. Remember, the note says not to call the police, and they did, and now the kidnapper is not calling to give them instructions. One would think this would raise great alarm to the Ramseys, but it didn't seem to. Something that John does bring up about the note to the police that morning is that $118,000 is almost the exact amount he received in a Christmas bonus last year, and he feels it's suspicious that they asked for that amount, suggesting that whoever took JonBenét knew intimate details of the family's finances. In the early afternoon, Detective Linda Arden arrives at the Ramseys' house. Detective Arden suggests that John do a top-to-bottom search of the house to see if anything seems out of place to him. During this thorough search, John eventually makes his way to the basement. Throughout this search, he has found nothing suspicious or out of place. Making sure he has checked every single nook and cranny of the house, he opens a door to the spare room in the basement and gives the room a once-over. It's at this point that everyone upstairs, including Detective Arden and Patsy Ramsey, hear John Ramsey scream from the basement. They then hear his heavy footsteps barreling up the stairs, all while he continues to scream. He runs into the living room, and soon everyone sees what he is holding in his arms: the small, lifeless body of 6-year-old JonBenét. Her head had been beaten in and was covered in blood, and her neck was covered in strangulation marks. There is no right or wrong behavior when it comes to grief, especially when it comes to the death of one's child. But there is a right and wrong way to handle a crime scene, and when John runs upstairs with JonBenét's body, leaving both doors to the spare room and the basement wide open, the crime scene becomes more contaminated than it already was. When John lays his daughter's body down, Detective Arden moves her body again so that she lays closer to the Christmas tree. John says that when he found JonBenét, she was lying on a white blanket on the floor, and her hands were tied over her head. Her mouth had been duct-taped shut. When police move downstairs to the spare room, they find the white blanket, the piece of duct tape, and a garrote, which is a handheld ligature used to strangle someone to death, made from one of Patsy's paintbrushes and a nylon cord, on the floor. So before we continue, let's go over the second big mistake in this investigation: the moving of the body. JonBenét was found dead in the spare basement room on a white blanket. She was moved off that blanket and subsequently touched by her father, and then was moved to another spot in the house by Detective Arden. How JonBenét's body was positioned, anything of note around or on her body was only seen by her distraught father. Once again, the crime scene was contaminated. In an article by CNN, forensic pathologist Dr. Daniel Spitz said that John taking the duct tape off JonBenét's mouth was also a big mistake, even if it was unintentional. He said that this prevented the forensic team from determining whether the duct tape was a murder weapon. He said, quote, "The duct tape on the mouth may have been part of the death sequence if, in fact, it was covering the nose and mouth together." At 10:45 p.m. that night, JonBenét's body is taken away by the county coroner. 2 days later, a shell-shocked Patsy, John, and their 9-year-old son Burke go to the police station, where they willingly give hair, blood, and handwriting samples. During JonBenét's autopsy, the medical examiner discovered that her cause of death was asphyxiation due to strangulation, in addition to a skull fracture. There was no conclusive evidence of rape, as no semen was found on the body and her vagina appeared to have been wiped clean, although the medical examiner did say there were physical indications of a sexual assault, and some blood was found in her underwear. The examiner also found what was believed to be pineapple in JonBenét's stomach. Her parents do not remember giving her any the night before she died, but police did find a bowl of cut-up pineapple in the kitchen during their initial investigation. When the bowl of pineapple was examined, forensic investigators found one set of fingerprints belonging to JonBenét's brother Burke. As minor as it seems, the pineapple is a big discussion point when people bring up theories about this case. Somehow Burke's fingerprints being on the bowl led some people to see the 9-year-old as a possible suspect. But the bowl was in his own home, and there is no reason why his fingerprints wouldn't be on it. The Ramseys maintained that Burke was in his room all night, and there was no evidence to prove otherwise. On December 29th, only a few days after the murder, the Ramseys move in with family in their hometown of Atlanta, Georgia, and leave their once seemingly perfect home in Colorado behind. 2 days later, JonBenét is laid to rest in Marietta, Georgia, next to her older half-sister Elizabeth, who died tragically in a car crash when JonBenét was 2. Before we get into what happens after JonBenét's funeral, I want to go over the crime scene one more time, because it's really weird when you think about it. I've covered a lot of home invasions at this point, and I have never seen a ransom note left at a crime scene where the body can easily be found. I've read about plenty of cases where murders demand ransom money from a victim's family, despite the victim being long dead. If you know anything about the serial killer Israel Keyes, you know he used fishing wire to keep his already dead victim's eyes open for a photo that he sent with his ransom demands. But as horrific as it is, it makes sense why he did that. Ransom is an exchange. A person returned alive for money. If the person is with the kidnapper, there is no way to know if they are holding up their end of the bargain, unless they send a photo. And as we see with Keyes, even that is not enough evidence. So that brings me to why JonBenét's crime scene is so strange. Why leave a ransom note when you know the child's body is going to be found within hours of writing it? The spare room she was found in was not a hidden room that no one ever went in. In fact, it was the room the parents had just used to hide the kids' Christmas presents in. It just made no sense, and the police in Boulder and the FBI thought so too. The ransom note was examined thoroughly by state and federal authorities, and they all agreed that there was something off about it. Not only did the very specific amount of the ransom, $118,000, match the exact amount of John Ramsey's bonus from the year before, but the paper that the note was written on came from within the Ramsey house. The pages for the ransom note had been torn from Patsy Ramsey's notepad. While it could be argued a killer would write a ransom note on any paper he could quickly find around the house, the note indicated that this was not a quick process. The note itself was extremely wordy and thought out. It was about 2.5 pages, handwritten. Most ransom notes are short and to the point. We have your child and she is safe. It will cost you X amount to get her back. Do not call the police. The killer would have had to spend a great deal of time writing that letter in the house, risking the chance of being caught. Now here is the third big mistake of this case. And this time, it isn't made by police. It's made by the Ramsey family. On New Year's Day, 1997, John and Patsy Ramsey give a televised interview with CNN. In the interview, Patsy says, "There is a killer on the loose. If I were a resident of Boulder, I would tell my friends to keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there." She then added, "America is suffering because we have lost faith in the American family. We are a Christian, God-fearing family. We love our children. We would do anything for our children." Media coverage is important for an unsolved murder, and the Ramseys were taking their opportunity to get their daughter's story out there. But this interview didn't sit well with police in Boulder, because the family had told them multiple times that they were too emotional to be interviewed by police, and yet, here they were being interviewed on television for the world to see. John would later admit that this interview was a huge error because the public was now focusing on him and his wife, and not a potential murderer on the loose. He said, quote, "That was a mistake. We had our close friends who just insisted we do that. The media is focusing on you as the killers, and they're criticizing Boulder, and you need to go out there and show people who you are," he says. And they kept insisting, "You've got to do it. You've got to go on TV." After the interview aired, police considered the Ramsey family uncooperative in the murder investigation of their daughter, and this information was leaked to the public. Here is where historical context is important to this case, and why it became so popular in the media. A year before JonBenét was murdered, the O.J. Simpson trial was televised and the country was riveted. The true crime obsession was really just getting started in American pop culture. So when the scandal and stories surrounding the O.J. trial lost its steam, there was a void that needed to be filled for the public that was craving more. Now here comes the murder of this little blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl from an affluent family, murdered in her own home. People wanted to know more, and the press wanted to give it to them. Pictures of JonBenét all dolled up in makeup and her pageant gowns were popping up everywhere you turned in 1997. JonBenét's participation in children's pageants would bring a lot of public criticism to the Ramsey family. People saw a little girl being dressed up as a woman, being paraded around, and sexualized by anyone who wanted to look at her. Many believed that perhaps her parents forced her into the spotlight and it was her presence in pageants that caught the attention of a murderous pedophile. The public was turning on the Ramseys, and it was only going to get worse. On January 3rd, police revealed to the public that the ransom note was written inside the Ramsey house and was written on a piece of paper from Patsy's notebook. 5 days later, news breaks that police may have found evidence of a practice, or first draft, version of the ransom note in the Ramsey house. It was around this same time that police were very obviously looking at the Ramsey family as suspects. And in March of 1997, handwriting analysis results of the ransom note finally came back, and it revealed something shocking. Based on the expert analysis, detectives confirmed that JonBenét's father, John, definitely did not write the ransom note. But there was a chance Patsy did. A little less than a month later, the Boulder Police Department announces that Patsy, John, and even 9-year-old Burke Ramsey are their prime suspects in the murder of JonBenét. And that's where we will end part 1, because part 2 is going to be packed to the brim with an investigation that will go on for decades, a media frenzy that put every member of the Ramsey family under a microscope, revelations from DNA evidence, and a shocking confession from a man living halfway across the world. Stay safe, strangers, and thanks for listening. This episode was written by Alexa Morrissey. Stranger in the House is a Boy Wonder production. All our sources will be linked in the show notes.